welcome to Today in Woburn. I'm your host, Samantha Stone, and we have a wonderful another election episode. This time, we're going to talk all about school committee with Andrew Lipsett. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So school year has started, which I think at some point, maybe none of us thought could be possible, right?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So your first term at school committee, I don't know if you realized when you were voting that you're going to be thrown into complete chaos, but we're glad for yourself and others being there to help us navigate through that. Tell us a little bit about what it's been like to have this be a first term and be so unusual in our circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly you hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, no one could have imagined that anything like this was coming at us. I mean, in some ways, it was obviously, it was very difficult to be in the middle of a first term and still learning how school committee worked. Myself and Colleen Cormier, who were the new members on the committee, really relied on our colleagues who had been around for a little while. But on another level, I mean, none of us had been through this before, right? So in some level, we were all kind of in our first term here. So the sense of, really trying to work it out together, I think in some ways helped bring us in a lot faster than maybe otherwise would have happened.
That's a really good point. I say this often, but I mean this. I know for me personally, while this might have not have been ideal in terms of for individual business and not being able to physically, more things being remote, I think lots more community members were participating and listening in. And I see it as a gift. Maybe it's sometimes a hindrance, but tell us a little bit about what that has provided in terms of your hearing directly from residents and their concerns and the things that they think are doing great.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was something that was really eye-opening. Is we've been talking for a long time about how to get the community engaged and how to increase our transparency, and then it was kind of shoved on us in a lot of different ways. And I think we did. We had more eyes on what we were doing because it was more accessible for people from home. We had to come up with methods to make our meetings more accessible to working families. Evening meetings are really hard for parents, and parents are our core constituency, right? So being able to, watch a meeting while cooking dinner, while cleaning up, while putting kids to bed, I mean, those were really, that really opened us up to a lot of people who might not be able to participate otherwise. People with disabilities were able to access our meetings maybe more easily than they otherwise could have. Families with limited English spoken at home, we were able to begin an English language parent advisory council online. And we got incredible buy-in, and those meetings are still taking place. And I have to think that might not have been able to be quite as vibrant without the accessibility. So I think in that regard, it did open up a lot of options. We had to work on online communication, social media. So developing those methods, I think, has been beneficial. I hope some of these systems stick around for a little while.
Me too. I think there's a lot of good things, lots of hard and challenging things, not to make light of it, but some good things that came out of it. And this is certainly one of them. Let's talk about the committees you're on. What committees do you serve on today? And what has sort of been the big focus for you this past year?
So I was lucky enough to not only get on my first choice committee, but also be named the chair of it. And that was the curriculum subcommittee. And so that's working with, in past years, it's been Wendy Sprague, who had been our assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, and now Courtney Young, who has stepped into that role really admirably. She's been, working in the Woburn schools in a lot of different capacities over the last few years, and has now made the jump to assistant superintendent. And I think that's been great. Curriculum, I'm a teacher, curriculum is where I live. And so being able to really dig into what we're doing and some of the exciting things that we're developing, even in the middle of a pandemic, being able to really be innovative, really be bold, thinking about how to deliver the best education we can to our kids. So being able to be part of that has been great. I'm also serving on the finance subcommittee, which is sort of the other end. Finance is not, curriculum is one of my strengths. I would not necessarily always call finance one of my strengths. And so being able to work with, with John Wells and Pat Chisholm and formerly Joe Elia, now Bob Canada, our assistant superintendent for business and operations, Patty McKinnon, being able to sort of get a sense of the financial side of how schools work. What are we spending our money on? How do we build better oversight systems for that? How do we plan for the future through our finances? Has been a really eye-opening experience for me. My view of education tends to be from the classroom. This is a whole different ballgame. I'm also serving on the resources subcommittee, which hasn't met quite as often as some of the others, but looking at our long-term planning, our facilities, this is going to be a big push for us going forward. So it's been interesting to sort of get to know Dave Dunkley, who's our head of facilities, and some of the people who are really doing that work day to day on the ground to make sure that our schools are ready for our kids.
I want to talk about finance committee just for a minute, because this year, one of the good things was we get a lot of extra money from the federal government from CARES Act and other means that but that could, as good as that is, we always want it. It does have to be spent in certain ways. And there is challenges of figuring out how do we effectively spend this really quickly, right? Because you get the money, you need to spend the money. So tell us a little bit about what that experience was like and how we came to some of the investments that we've made.
Yeah, we had, and really, it's kind of a tale of two budgets over the last couple of years. We had a budget during, in the spring of 2020 that was very much a crisis budget, right? We were in the middle of the sort of the opening months of the pandemic. At that point, we were working to save jobs. We were working to maintain programs. We were worried we might face cuts. And then, for this budget, it was a very, very different feeling. This was a feeling of, we have an opportunity to have, I think I used the words transformative budget. And I think that's what it is. That's what our administration was able to develop. That's what we were able to advance in the committee. And you're right. We have to be careful with how we spend the grant money that's come to us from the federal government. We have to balance our longer term recurring needs, our staffing needs, with the ability to spend one-time costs that will advance the district. And I think we did that really well. We were able to buy in one fell swoop curriculum across the district, which is something that, I think I heard Wendy Sprague at one point suggested that that's something that could take 10 to 15 years had we not been able to have the grant money that we received. So being able to implement brand new curriculum across the board for our students, modern, up-to-date curriculum it's been fantastic. It's just starting now, but seeing the excitement of that is really, it's wonderful. We were just in a curriculum subcommittee meeting the other day with our new history and social sciences coordinator, our social studies coordinator, our new math coordinator, both of whom were talking about the new curriculum that we are able to implement now with this funding. A capital resources study, feasibility study, which we're going to be sort of following through over the next year, where we're really able to get a long-term look at what our building needs are. How are we going to make sure that our facilities are ready for our kids, right? What buildings do we need to renovate? What buildings do we need to tweak? What are our longer-term building needs? Are we going to need new structures, right? How are we going to service our preschool, right? And so the things that have been on our minds for a long time, this study is going to really give us a much better look at what our priorities are. And that'll set us up. And that's something that we couldn't have really budgeted for except for this grant money. So on top of we've been able to hire new staff, we've been able to expand some of our programs, and these one-time costs that we've really been able to advance the district. So it's been a really exciting time and a really exciting budget to see.
Yeah, it is an exciting opportunity to do all of those things. And I love the approach that you're talking about, where we're sort of doing we're taking some actions immediately, and we're also doing some work to invest in some long-term planning and input that we might not otherwise have been able to take the breath to do. One of the things that we talked about when we met before you served on the committee was the desire to have a more diverse staff at the schools that better represent the communities we're in. How do you feel we're doing in that regard? I know we've done some things, but how are we doing, and what more should we be doing?
Yeah, I think this is this is one of the biggest areas where we need work. Unfortunately, and there are extenuating circumstances after extenuating circumstances, but we haven't really made as much progress here as I know we would have hoped to. We have a district where our most recent count, we have over 30% of our students are non-white for the first time in the history of Woburn. We have a growing non-white population. We have a growing population of students who are learning English. We have a growing population of students who are not always seeing themselves reflected in authority figures. And we know that matters. We know that it has a direct correlation to future success, to academic success, to all of these things, right? The ability to see yourself projected into the future is critical for kids. But right now, our teachers, we have an incredible teaching staff. Our teachers, less than 4% of our teaching staff is non-white. So while we have an incredible core of teachers, we do want to make sure that we're looking at how do we keep up with our students? How do we make sure that our students can see themselves in their teachers in maybe sometimes a more fundamental way than they currently do, right? It's entirely possible to have great role models who are not from your own background, but it also helps to have those role models available as well, right? And we also know educationally that all students benefit from a teaching staff that has a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different life experiences, not just racial and ethnic, although that's important, but different financial backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds in general, in terms of sexual orientation, gender orientation. These are the ability for students to practice who they are in the face of role models is huge. And so, that's something that we need to work on. I think there are ways to do it. We have a new human resources director right now. Hopefully we'll be hearing from her in our next meeting about exactly this issue. I would like to see us think about some more creative means. I think there are opportunities in things like incentives, tuition reimbursement, debt, housing, transportation that we could look at. So I'm hoping that we're able to sort of think about some more creative means of doing that.
I love that, and I think that that we're thinking about it, and we're sort of aware where we are. There are other things besides staff also that help our students recognize themselves. I know, for example, we look at libraries, what books are in our school libraries. We look at our curriculum. Does it accurately reflect different points of view across different things? When you look at some of those efforts, separate from what we're doing from a staffing, kind of, how are we doing there, and what other things might we be looking at?
Yeah, this is something where we've seen a lot of movement in the last year, a year plus, where Courtney Young, even before she became our assistant superintendent for curriculum, was working with our director of curriculum for ELA, for English Language Arts, to make sure that the books that we're using in our classrooms really reflect a diversity of life experiences, right? That we have characters who represent lots of different backgrounds, and lots of different, from characters with disabilities to characters of a variety of multicultural backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, really trying to make sure that all of our kids can find reading material that appeals to them in lots of different ways, whether it be reading about a character who they see themselves in, or reading about a character who has a life experience completely different from their own. That's really that's something that can really spark a love of reading in students, having the diversity of choice available to them. And so we're working on that in our reading programs. We're doing the same in our libraries. We're trying to make sure that we're offering courses, elective courses that allow our students to really branch out. And I think that's really critical. It also follows, our new Massachusetts History and Social Studies frameworks, which came out a couple of years ago. I think do a better job of this than what we had before. We were sort of languishing in older frameworks that I don't think really did a great job of reflecting the breadth of experience that makes up the United States, that makes up our world. And so it's been exciting to see the changes, the advancement of civics projects that allow students to really get their hands into the process of government, the process of civic engagement, along with those life experiences that we're trying to expose all of our kids to.
I want to go back a little bit in time to sort of some of the health crisis that we've been going through, and in some ways continue to go through, although things are in a different place than they were a year ago. And in that early days, before we had returned to full in-person instructions, the school committee very thoughtfully and very carefully had to weigh all of the options, what DESE, the body of Massachusetts was telling us, what our health experts were telling us, what all those interests and things were. And at that point in time, you had voted against going back to in-person instruction, and you had done, I think, a very eloquent job of describing your point of view and your thought process. And to your credit, immediately when the decision was made, although it was not the same decision you had voted for, you were very supportive of all the things that needed to happen to moving back in school. Now, knowing what we know, in hindsight, many, many months later, would you have voted any differently on that issue? And I know we don't have a crystal ball and the benefit of, hindsight normally, but we, there's value sometimes in reflecting. You're a history teacher, you get this, right?
And, historians would call this a counterfactual, right? And in history, we try to stay away from them.
But I'm not going to, we're going to break that rule.
It might surprise you to learn this is the first time that I have been asked this particular question. So what I would say is, I think we were able to do as well as we could have done, given the circumstances. That obviously was something, we couldn't have predicted would happen. I think we were all hoping for that, but it was not a sure thing. If I knew that for certain, if we had gone into that vote in August of 2020, knowing for sure that how we would come through it, it's entirely possible my vote would have changed. I don't regret or question my vote. I made the vote that I thought was the best vote at the time, and I did so. I think it's interesting. If the statement that I read during that meeting focused, health was a piece of it. But a lot of it was also operational and really in terms of educational philosophy. One of the things that worried me going into a system where you had a hybrid education, where students were going to be coming in part of the day and part of the week, and then being at home the rest of the week, a virtual academy where students were going to be virtual, there was a lot of moving parts there. And sort of one of my fundamental tenets on education is when you start dividing up public education, that's when things go wrong, right? That's when systems become too complex for a system with limited resources to handle. It's also something where you see equity get thrown out the window a lot of the time. It tends to hurt the most vulnerable students first. I think that we avoided that to a large degree in Woburn, right? And for that, I'm really thankful. We're also here thankful to our community partners, the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club. We were able to set up off-site learning centers for students who were in hybrid, but whose families, maybe didn't have the home support that would have allowed for that. The ability to give students a space to do that was tremendous. And all the credit in the world to our team who were able to set that up, and to our community partners who were able to make it work. Without things like that, and without, I think it's one thing that's really struck me has been the importance of some of the investment we did before the pandemic. We hired a lot of positions that there maybe were people in the community who would have said we didn't need. Things like weekly art and music, which was put into our, which teachers have been fighting for a long time, and which was put into our contract just before I came onto the committee. Things like enhanced social emotional supports in our schools, adjustment counselors in every elementary school, curriculum, some of our instructional coaches, or I'm thinking of the exact position here.
I won't hold you to the exact position. I know what you mean.
Our content specialists. It's been a long day. Our content specialists inside the elementary schools, these were positions where when we had to go to virtual, or when, in our virtual academies, these were the positions that made those things work. And if we hadn't had them, then things could have gone an entirely different direction, right? So I guess this is a bit of a sprawling answer to your question, right? And I don't mean to be in any way.
No, it's a complex question. I asked you an impossible question to answer, right? I asked you, go back in time, right? Take your time machine and think, and this is a very unfair question. So you take as long as you need to
It's certainly not
an
unfair question. I will tell you that. I think the answer is that, yeah, I think my vote would have changed had I known. Yeah. But one of the things that you have to weigh in a vote like that is what effect is this going to have on our most vulnerable students, on our most vulnerable families, on our most vulnerable staff. And that was, that was at the core of my thinking then. It's at the core of every decision that I've tried to make over the subsequent year. And if I'm lucky enough to be reelected, then that will be at the core of every decision I make going forward, right? Because that's what our schools need to do. If our most vulnerable students, our most vulnerable families are really struggling, then our district is struggling. So that's at the center of what I'm talking about.
So at the beginning of our conversation, we talked about that some of the digital communications and meetings has improved access to community and involvement in the decisions in the school committee and input. But at the same time, we've pretty much given up all community events, right? All the things that you might normally just interact with other families and parents and be at places. We didn't have those things anymore, or they were so heavily restricted as, you couldn't have the same kind of interactions. What are some of the ways that you're trying to stay connected to the community outside of the meetings themselves to make sure that issues, challenges, concerns, excitement, opportunity are surfacing to you as a candidate for reelection?
It's not easy. I think things have opened up a little bit now so that we may not have some of the same meetings and some of the same activities in school as we used to. We're starting up some of them again. But it's, I go out of my way to talk to parents that I run into about how their school year is starting up. And sometimes those conversations can get a little awkward. But as every experience is going to be different. But really trying to stay connected. I think in this regard, for me, I have a little bit of a different perspective on this. I'm experiencing all of this as a school committee member, yes, but I'm also experiencing it in another community, admittedly, but as a teacher. I'm experiencing it as a parent of a third grader in the Woburn Public Schools. And so I see a lot of, how the decisions that we're making up here really affect the people on the ground floor. And so that's been one way to be able to stay connected, to be able to understand what our teachers are dealing with, to be able to understand what our school staff is dealing with, how our students sort of experience their day. So that's really helped in terms of understanding how to stay connected, right? How do we, what are the common shared experiences that we can play off, and how do different people experience different decisions that we're making, right? So being able to have those perspectives has helped in that regard.
Yeah, I thank you for that. And I think that I see you often tagged in comments in various Facebook groups and other things. And I think there's a reason, right? You're making yourself accessible, and it's not like you're in there to, you're not going to, have a whole debate or meeting through a social communication, but you're listening clearly and you're making yourself available to anyone. Often I see you come in there and give an answer to a question we know the answer to, and provide your contact information for those who might not otherwise know how to get a hold of you. So, thank you for that. I think one of the things I say this almost every interview, but I really mean this, that I love about Woburn is how accessible our local elected officials are. We don't always agree on everything, and we don't have to, but the ability to have a conversation and for you to make the time to spend with me. I know it's dinner time. I know you got two adorable, fabulous kids who are probably driving your wife crazy in the other room as she's trying to barricade them out. So Oh, good. Right. So, I think that it's super valuable that we've done that. One of the things that I hope you do not have to weigh in on as a school committee but I know I've had a number of people reach out and ask me about is at the point that vaccinations become approved for children under 12, and hopefully the state or the government will make these kinds of decisions for us. But should it come to the school committee to need to make a decision about mandating vaccines like we do other vaccines that are required, I'm not asking you to tell me, because I'm not going to make you go forward in time. I made you go back. I won't make you go forward. To tell me what whether you support it or not. But I would think it's helpful to understand how you would think about answering this question as a member of the school committee and the things that you would want to know to inform that decision.
I mean, I think if we assume that the conditions that you just laid out are met, right? Full FDA approval, I think when it comes to issues of vaccination, we need to defer to our medical professionals. We need to understand, what the benefit is, not just to any individual student, but to the community at large. You're right, we do mandate lots of vaccines to enter public education. And I think that would be a factor that we would have to consider, right? I think, one thing that has been really clear in terms of vaccine rollout, and one thing that we need to pay attention to, is that there have been structural barriers to vaccination. We're seeing vaccination rates in communities that may lack structural access, communities of color, low-income communities, people with disabilities, that the vaccination rates are lower among those population groups. It's not for lack of want of the vaccine. It's oftentimes because of lack of availability, time, scheduling issues, childcare issues. There are lots and lots of reasons why it might be hard for people to be able to make the time to go, sometimes a long distance. I mean, that's changed a little bit in recent months, but to be able to become vaccinated. So I think if we were to do something like that, we would need to be very deliberate about how we ensure the opportunity for all of our families to become vaccinated, right? And I stress opportunity. Make it available in our school. And this is something that, between City Hall and the school department, we've been able to run vaccine clinics. And that's been fantastic. Being able to continue that, especially if there were down the line sort of more of a mandate situation, would be critical. Making sure, I think there also is going to be, unfortunately, an issue of buy-in. The vaccine has become very political, I think, in a really unfortunate way. I know that the experience of attempting to mandate flu vaccinations last year is going to be high on the minds of people making these decisions. I mean, what we saw there was, we mandated the flu vaccine, and we at least, in general, we know that people get the flu vaccine at very, very high rates. What we didn't get was the paperwork, right? And so, that level of buy-in, I think maybe might make some people a little trigger happy with it, a little trigger shy with it. So, make sure that we're really giving people the opportunity to get the vaccine, that we're being proactive there. It's not just sort of inviting people to come take it, but it's bringing the service to them in a way that can be really more powerful and more meaningful to people who sometimes lack that access. So doing that hard work to get our community vaccinated, that's the way that we can do that if we were to arrive at that situation.
Thank you for that. And thank you for answering all of these questions. This has been a really valuable conversation. I feel like I know you pretty well, Andrew, and I still learn something new when we chat. So I'm super appreciative of that. For those folks who might want to learn more about your campaign or have questions for you, what is the best place for them to get that information?
Absolutely. So you can go to my website, lipsettschoolcommittee.com. All one word spelled out, and the same at gmail.com, lipsettschoolcommittee@gmail.com. You can reach me. That's the campaign email address. For specific school committee matters, you can find my school committee email address on the city website or on the Woburn Public Schools website.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And as always, Woburn, please continue to take good care of each other.